Thank you and welcome to the show today. The topic this morning is Behind the Public Veil, the humanness of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And we're fortunate to have with us to talk about the humanness of Dr. Martin Luther King, Dr. LBaldwin. And of course, Dr. Baldwin, let me welcome you to the show today and to tell you how delighted we are and to tell you that we're happy to be able to deal with another of your many, many books. I think that you've been with us over the last 25 or 30 years, Dr. Baldwin.
It's been quite an honor.
And every time you come in, you bring a book with you.
Yeah.
You see, you've got so many books.
I'm thankful for that.
And you've made a very, very important contribution to the life and times of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Thank you so much.
What you have here, I think, will give us an opportunity to see Martin Luther King from an entirely different perspective than the Dr. Martin Luther King that you've presented to us, because you've talked about his assassination, you've talked about his trials and his tribulations, and Martin Luther King this and Martin Luther King that, and we're just delighted to have you here, Dr. Baldwin.
Thank you so much. It's always an honor.
And let us have you to give us some statements during this first segment in reference to who you are, and then get into talking about Dr. Martin Luther King and why you wrote this book, Behind the Veil.
Okay, I grew up in the Alabama Black Belt in Camden, Alabama, Wilcox County, Alabama, in the late 40s, 50s, during the days of segregation. So I was exposed to segregation. I attended segregated schools, graduated from Camden Academy High School in Alabama. From there, I matriculated at Talladega College in Alabama, graduating with a degree in history, BA degree in history, in 1971. And in the fall of 1971, I became a student at Crozer Theological Seminary in Rochester, New York. It had recently moved there from Chester, Pennsylvania. And I received the MA and the MDiv degree at Crozer Seminary, and the PhD degree from Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. And since that time, 1980, I received the PhD degree. I've been writing, studying, doing research on the life of Martin Luther King Jr. And up to this point, I've authored 6 books on King, edited 2, co-edited 2, and co-authored 2, for a total of 12 books. So I've devoted much of my academic life, not only to teaching, but to writing about Dr. King.
Now, the book that you have now, Dr. Baldwin, deals with Dr. Martin Luther King from a different perspective entirely. Why don't you make some statements about that book, and then we'll come back and we'll allow you to elaborate on it after this first segment.
I wrote the book because we, I think, have lost a sense of the ordinary person, the human being that was Martin Luther King Jr. Every year, third Monday in January, we celebrate his birthday. But I think the ordinary person that was King, the human being that was King, has gotten lost in our annual national celebrations. And I wrote the book to sort of reclaim that ordinary, and Dr. King was an ordinary person on many levels. He was a human being. I understand the need to create superheroes. We live in a capitalistic society, and so we've created this larger-than-life figure, this iconic hero, this messianic figure, this superhuman personality. But Dr. King was an ordinary human being. And the book is really about reclaiming the ordinary person, the ordinary human being that was Martin Luther King Jr.
You know, I think that even the idea, Dr. Baldwin, is an inspiration to us all to understand that we don't always start, you didn't always start out as Dr. LBaldwin. There was somebody that was LBaldwin long before you matriculated in all of those institutions that you've attended. And so that's the same thing we're saying about Dr. Martin Luther King, I would imagine. He was not always delivering that speech, I have a dream, and etc. It was something about him before he got to that stage of being able to do that. And this is what you were saying that this book reveals.
This book reveals the very human side. We have this image of the man who made great speeches before thousands of people, who led large demonstrations, civil rights campaigns. But what about the man on his knees praying to God, asking for strength and asking for a deliverance? That is the human Martin Luther King Jr.
And so, Dr. Baldwin, what we'll do, we're going to take this first commercial break, and then the second segment of 8 minutes will allow you to devote that time to talking about the book and the human Martin Luther King. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Yeah, you know, things
his
that
eating
you want.
habits, his love for music, all that.
That's right. That's the Martin Luther King that we like to see.
That people don't know.
To know that he was just like everybody else.
Exactly.
You know,
and that we can all, you know,
relate to the fact of death and know that even though we might be ordinary,
we can strive to the same standards of excellence.
That's right.
That he strove for.
That's right. Yeah, well, I appreciate that.
Yeah,
he was not always Dr. Martin Luther King having a dream. Yeah, he was a young boy.
Martin Luther King Jr., the ordinary boy, the ordinary man.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
That's right. That's an inspiration to us all, though. That says something.
I've always told my students that. I've always approached it from that angle, you know.
So you can be anything you want to be.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right. Strive toward excellence.
That's right.
Yeah.
1 minute out.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate this information.
Thank you.
We have to get this on tape, you see.
Thank you.
Do something in reference to this.
30 seconds.
Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. Louis Baldwin, and he's giving us some information in reference to a new book dealing with Dr. Martin Luther King. In an attempt, Dr. Baldwin, I think we've demonstrated this book on a number of occasions on this particular show, but in an attempt to sort of get into Dr. Martin Luther King behind the veil, behind the public veil. Let's start off where you wish to start.
Yes, I've tried to look at the Martin Luther King Jr., the personal qualities of Dr. King that endeared him to common, ordinary people that he met daily. He met a lot of common, ordinary people on the streets, but what were those qualities that endeared him to those people? One, of course, had to do with his love for soul food, his eating habits. He had this robust appetite for soul food, and he would eat with his hands. And you know that kind of quality endears one to the very common people. He always ate with his hands, most of cases. He loved the ribs, spare ribs. He loved chicken, fried chicken. He loved pig's feet. He loves collard greens and cornbread. So he was able to relate to people at the lower levels of the social economic ladder because of his eating habits.
Soul food.
Soul food. And also his love for music. He had a great love for the Negro spirituals, for gospel music, also for rhythm and blues, Sam and Dave, the music of Aretha Franklin. So he was able to embrace different kinds of music. He was able to had a great appreciation for dance. He was very playful. He teased people a lot, and he used to tell a lot of jokes, and had this tremendous gift of folk wit, humor, and laughter. He loved to tell jokes about Negro preachers. He loved to tell jokes about the Negro church and jokes about the movement. So he was a very fun-loving person, and he found the energy the inner resources to celebrate and enjoy life despite the fact that he was receiving sometimes 40 telephone calls a day threatening his life. He was jailed some 20 to 25 times. His family was threatened. He was the victim of verbal abuse, racial epithets, but he still found time to enjoy life, to celebrate life through his eating habits, through his love for music and dance, through his tendencies to be playful, to tease people, and also through his gift of folk wit and humor and laughter. Dr. King, according to Ralph Abernathy, had he not succeeded as a civil rights leader, he would have succeeded as a stand-up comic.
That's right. That's exactly it. Had not Barack Obama been the president of the United States, he would have succeeded as what? A stand-up comedian.
That's right.
That's exactly it.
So to say that Dr. King was in some ways the comedian of the civil rights movement is not to trivialize his role.
That's right.
He was a tremendous leader, but he was able to inject humor and wit and laughter into the movement, and even in the most difficult situations. Because, for an example, before they moved into Birmingham in 1963, Dr. King preached a mock eulogy for Ralph Abernathy and others who were involved. Said, look, we're going into Birmingham. Some of us might not make it. This is what I'm going to say over your dead body. And it created a lot of laughter and that kind of thing. And it eased a lot of the tension and the anxiety that came with these demonstrations. So yeah, he was able to inject humor, and it became very acceptable in the circles of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and in the larger context of the civil rights movement.
Laughter does something. There's something that you can do with laughter and that you can't do in any other way.
It has a healing effect, and Dr. King understood that, a healing effect. So he turned to laughter and humor. We know that spirituality was important, you know, praying, that kind of thing, but laughter, humor, sustain them in the context, re-energize them in the context of the movement. And we have to look at laughter and humor if we're going to understand why Dr. King was such a resilient personality.
Yeah, he understood that.
Yeah,
he understood the importance of a good joke, a good statement that will bring about laughter at a special time has a healing quality and characteristic.
And in that sense, he was part of a culture, because as far back as the days of slavery, you find that African Americans were able to laugh at their condition. And James Weldon Johnson wrote about that in the 1930s, about the gift of laughter, humor in the black community, and how it was a compensating mechanism.
Laugh instead of crying.
Yes.
That's exactly what it is. And sometimes you want to cry, but you might be too old to cry, and so you come up with something funny in reference to laughter.
Yes, it was a compensating mechanism. It had a healing effect, and Dr. King was an heir of that. So he was able to bring humor and laughter into in the context of the movement.
That's right. And that's a good quality to be able to understand. You see, a lot of folks might not understand that, but sometimes humor can break things.
Exactly.
You know, you're all tied up and whatever, and somebody drop a good line. And especially a person of some authority or whatever, he might drop a word on you or something.
And what I've done in the book is to use Howard Kleinbell, who is one of the great psychologists of religion, and to use Lawrence Levine, who is a cultural historian. Kleinbell talks about the healing effects of laughter and humor. And Levine, of course, talks about laughter as a kind of compensating mechanism. So I've used these scholars to frame my thoughts about Dr. King and his use of humor and his you know, delight in laughter and wit in the context of the movement. So That's a side I think that has not been covered in the scholarship on Dr. King.
And I think that that's a contribution. That's a big contribution in terms of who Dr. King was.
Yes.
You see, you've got his statue on the mall in
That's
Washington,
right.
D.C., and you know all these other things about this great man. But
Yes.
here was a man that could tell a joke,
Yes.
that understood a joke, and could have laughter among his friends and etc.
Yeah, we know the superhero, the larger-than-life personality, but we don't know the ordinary person or the human being.
And you're able to reveal this in this book.
That's
So
right.
what we're going to do, we're going to take this second commercial break, and then we'll come back with this final segment. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Yeah, sometimes you will laugh instead of crying.
That's right.
That's right. You know what I'm saying?
And, you know, the
There's a
laughter.
lot of situations that you see, and I think I've said that on many occasions, looking at the continent of Africa and hearing some of the weird things that folks are doing in terms of stealing money and whatever, and then you laugh about it, but you want to, you know, you laugh instead of crying. The only other alternative you have is to cry over it.
That's part of the survival
That's
instinct,
right.
I
That's,
think.
that's exactly it.
I think people,
That's exactly it.
when
Our
they're
people
able
went
to
through that a
laugh,
long time. Yeah, if you can't laugh, if you were a slave and you didn't have the ability to laugh,
You
the man looked at you because you might be ready to start a revolution or
That's
something.
right.
And so you don't want
Folk
you
wit
right.
and human laughter.
That's right. That's right.
Being able to laugh at your
that's
condition,
right.
I think speaks to a level of maturity
That's
that,
right.
that very few human beings reach.
Or very few people understand.
Yes.
You see, the court jester is
Yes.
somebody. You know, the king needed him.
That's right.
That's right. He needed him. And I certainly appreciate this. This is some
Thank
excellent
you.
information. I think this really throws a different perspective in terms of Dr. Martin Luther King. He's still the man that had a dream.
That's
You know,
right.
he worked his way up
It
there.
didn't undermine his
That's right.
sincerity.
No, not
in
at
his
all.
dream, yeah.
Not at all. Not at all. That's one of the great characteristics of being a leader, you know, humor.
That's
You know, if you're a
right.
leader, you can't laugh about things or have any kind of humor about things. Then you
Can't be a quality leader.
Can't be a quality leader. So we've got this final 10 minutes. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. LBaldwin, and he's giving us some information in reference to a recently published book dealing with Dr. Martin Luther King called Behind the Public Veil, the Humanness of Dr. Martin Luther King. And Dr.